And I think all these retail traders, many of whom were here, many of whom were in Asia, just getting absolutely decimated last Monday when oil went negative. If you're going to venture into the ETF world around oil, I would imagine you got to be really, really careful right now.
Well, you absolutely do, Brian, because when you talk about oil and you talk about any sort of futures commodity product, you have to be careful how you're owning that, because embedded in every futures product is not just the contract specifications that you see on the CME or whatnot. It's behind it is a cost to carry of those futures. And whether you see the futures trade negative or there's some contango, and you brought up the oil futures looking out to September trading as high as 24. Behind that is an embedded cost to carry, the storage, the transportation and whatnot behind that. So instead of rather buying an ETF like a USO or something like that, I'd rather bet on the guys, the actual professionals. People pay me to sort of do their financing, right? I'd rather bet on the oil people to do that for me. The people like CONOCOPHILLIPS, Phillips 66, Valero, those types of names and ETFs around that, rather than actually betting on the exact futures market.
That's listen, interesting point here, because when you buy an ETF, you're going to get a bundle of companies. That has been a positive and still will be a positive in many ways. But with oil, some of these companies, as we saw with Diamond Offshore, may go away. So what you're saying is, if anybody out there wants to bet on oil, buy a couple of big cap individual oil stocks and maybe avoid the ETFs.
Yeah, well, especially avoid the ETFs that track futures, that track commodity products. I don't like necessarily trading those. If I'm going to bet on an ETF, something like XLE looks somewhat attractive actually to me, and that's something actually I might dip into today. When you look at that, that's had a nice uptrend channel here going on, bottoming off these March, April lows here and moving higher, and it's trading near the bottom of the channel above its support line. So that's an ETF that I might own, because that has the big cap mega names that I'm talking about. Those top holdings, the top 10 holdings in something like that, have those big mega cap names that I'm going to look at. So I'm either looking at those big cap names like that, or I'm going to pick out some individual names like you just mentioned.
From a macro market perspective, I mean, what a bounce this market has had. Nobody's saying it's been a good year. We're still down for the year. But if you look at the last 2.5 weeks, Brian, we've done about a 60% retracement off that low. Now, 60% retracements, not to quote 15th century Italian mathematicians, Fibonacci or whatever, I mean, they have failed in the past. Is this rally going to last, or is this literally one of the biggest head fakes that we have had in a decade?
Hey, I have a master's in engineering, so I know about math and 60% retracements and Fibonacci. And yeah, it is a dangerous level, because when markets recover very quickly like that, they do tend to move to some of these technical levels. And so I'm looking for, let's say, for example, the S&P to trade through 2950, let's call it, to get above that level there, for the NASDAQ to trade slightly higher from where it's at, because both those big indexes have hit these magical mathematical levels you're talking about, where we could see a pullback here. Now, look, the one concern when you take a look at VIX and volatility, the VIX is still above 30 right now. So for a market to rally and move into a bull market, it's highly unusual to see something like that happen with the level of volatility we're still seeing, meaning the day-to-day moves in this market of 2% swings or whatnot. It's still a dangerous time to be investing here. Obviously, if you're betting on science, you're going to bet to the upside, and that may continue, and we'd love to see the VIX come off. But there's going to be a lot of back and forth movement over the next couple months for sure.